Greetings from Wyoming. OSY Guy here, and this is my review of Ubuntu 19.04. I've been doing reviews of the GNOME version of Ubuntu ever since version 16.04. Continue to do that all the way up till 18.04, when I decided that I liked Pop! OS better. Pop! OS is a variant of Ubuntu. I liked some of its defaults a little bit better, so I went with that for a couple of versions. But then when I got to Pop! OS 19.04, I found a couple of flaws, and I decided to reconsider Ubuntu 19.04. When I'm deciding on the Linux distribution to use, I consider these three things. First of all, the desktop interface has got to be GNOME 3. I've tried other Linux desktop environments, and I keep coming back to GNOME 3 where I'm the most comfortable and the most productive. I also look for high availability of software. And when you're in the Ubuntu world, which means you're either running Ubuntu or you're running a distribution that is based on Ubuntu, you have access to the extensive Ubuntu repositories, lots of software available. You also have available to you PPAs, personal package archives, which I refer to sometimes as supplemental side repositories, which give you even more software options. You can also use app images, snap packages, and flatpaks. So that's a lot of software options available when you're in the Ubuntu arena. I also like to have a stable, error-free performance. That means that when I start up the computer, I don't want to see any startup errors. And when I shut down the computer, I don't want to see any shutdown errors. And I don't want to see any crashes and freezes in between time either. Now, when I tried Pop! OS 19.04, I ran across a couple of interesting problems. Maybe about every fourth time that I would boot up into Pop! OS, I would end up with a black screen. And it would stay that way, and so I would walk up to the computer and I'd press a key on the keyboard, and that would expose a screen like this. The last line saying a start job is running for dev mapper crypt swap. And it would never resolve, and so I would either have to press Control-Alt-Delete and start over again, or I would have to force the computer off and then back on again. That certainly was an error that should never have been there, and so that was a frustration. I also saw a cosmetic shutdown error that I want to mention as well. Now, this happened every time I would shut down out of Pop! OS. I would see about 3 error messages that would say failed to unmount / old root, and then some subdirectories of old root, and then it would say device or resource busy. That was a cosmetic error in that it was not really indicating that I actually had any problems. But I would see about 3 error lines at shutdown, and I just didn't like that either. So my experience in Ubuntu is that it is very clean. Clean startup, clean shutdown, clean performance, and so I decided to switch over to Ubuntu instead. When we're switching from an earlier version of Ubuntu or Pop! OS to 19.04, we'll be changing our Linux kernel to 5.0. We'll be changing some of most of the programs that come pre-installed to later versions of themselves. So I'm showing an example here that LibreOffice has been moved to 6.2, and we'll be getting a GNOME desktop environment of 3.32. There's something that I change almost immediately, so I'm going to have you take a look at this little snapshot from gnome.org, where they're giving a description of GNOME as available on Ubuntu. It says this: Ubuntu 19.04 includes GNOME 3.32 with minor alterations. If you install GNOME-session, you can also choose to launch a pristine GNOME from the login screen. I'm running a pristine GNOME, so if I slide down to my next workspace, you are seeing a GNOME session, so you don't see an Ubuntu dock showing up on the left-hand side of the screen. We're going to access that dock in a little bit different way. It's actually the traditional way that GNOME 3 works by default. We're going to press the super key Super is the name that has been given by GNOME to describe the Windows logo key on a Windows keyboard or the command key on an Apple keyboard. So as I press the super key, I switch over from a normal view to the activities overview, where you can see my dock now exposed. And so there are my favorite applications down the list here. And if I don't see what I'm looking for there, I can click on Show Applications. And then here is my first of 3 screens of the applications that I have installed on this computer. Now, if we decide to run the Software Center, if I click on that software icon, then I switch over from the Activities view into the normal view, and the Activities view disappears and the dock goes away. That's the way I like it. I really like to see a clean interface like this. So that's my preferred session. It's a GNOME session. You can change over as easily as this. After you boot into Ubuntu, just open up a terminal and type in sudo apt install gnome-session, reboot the computer, and you'll be able to, at the login screen, you'll click on a gear icon that will allow you to change from an Ubuntu session to a GNOME session. Since I have chosen the GNOME session, my shell theme and applications theme, the default themes have changed from Yaru, those are the Ubuntu default themes, to Adwaita, which are the default GNOME themes. So I'm going to show you first of all the shell theme. The shell theme actually shows up by clicking on items on the panel. So if I click on the clock icon on the panel, then I get a black background, white text, and blue highlight. If I go over and select my Wi-Fi network here, if I choose a network and I just click on one of these, then you can see that, again, it's a blue highlight. Now, if we're in Ubuntu, in Ubuntu session, I guess I'd say, the shell theme is very much similar. It's going to look a lot the same, but I would just say that there's one particular, maybe subtle change, and that is that your highlights are going to be in red instead of in blue. But that'll be the only difference there. But there's a more dramatic change as far as the applications theme is concerned. The applications theme is also Adwaita. So let me open up a couple of windows here of applications. So here's my file manager, and then I'll open up GNOME Tweaks and place it over here, and we'll go to the Appearance tab. Now, as I said, I booted into my GNOME session, so the shell theme is automatically the Adwaita shell theme. If you boot into Ubuntu session, then it will automatically be the Yaru shell theme. Okay, now the applications theme, that's what the windows look like, the way that they're drawn and the way that they display the program itself. And so let me just switch this over to Yaru, which is the Ubuntu built-in theme. And you can see it's a starker theme. We have black title bars and red highlights. If I choose a folder, I get a red highlight there again. And I really do like the Adwaita theme better. It's more subtle. We just have a pleasant gray shaded title bar, and the highlights are in blue. So those are the changes that are made to the default shell and applications themes. GNOME Tweaks is a terrific program to add into your computer to give you more control over your GNOME interface. It's easy to install. You can either open up your software center and install it from there, or you can open up a terminal and type in sudo apt install gnome-tweaks. While you're in that terminal, you might as well also install chrome-gnome-extension. That is the communication tool that talks between your browser and the extensions website of GNOME. And since I have that Chrome-gnome extension in place, this web page knows what version of GNOME I'm running, and so it knows that I'm running Gnome 3.32. So we're looking at the current version here, and it has narrowed down my choices to the best choices for my version of GNOME. You can click on any of the items in the lists here. There are a total of 20 pages of extensions, and you can install them. As soon as you install them, then they will show up in installed extensions up here, and so you have the ability to turn on and off the extensions and to make settings changes to those extensions. There are a couple of extensions here that are automatically turned off since I am not booted into an Ubuntu session. So the Ubuntu app indicators and Ubuntu dock are both turned off. But I have installed the parent to Ubuntu app indicators up here. It's called kstatus notifier / app indicator. That's a really good thing to have. In many cases, if you have some programs that are running in the background, they often will represent themselves on the panel up on the top here. So I'm running Nextcloud client, and so as I click on the green check mark icon up here, it drops down and shows that I can access my Nextcloud folder. I can pause my synchronization. I can make settings changes. I'm also running screen recorder to capture this this video, and so I can get access to pause the recording and save the recording and so on from up there. That all happens from the kstatus notifier extension. One of the strong suits of GNOME are the keyboard shortcuts that have been developed over the years to get control over your interface. And the keyboard shortcuts are memorable and very effective and usable. So let me just give you some quick examples here. I'll press Control-Alt down arrow to slide to my next workspace. Now I'll use an Ubuntu keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt-T to open up the terminal. Now I'd like to make the terminal full size, so I'll hold down the super key and press up arrow, and then super down arrow will unmaximize that window. Super right will tile it to the right. Super left will tile to the left. Super down arrow will make it back over to normal size, and super W will close the window. Now I'll press super alt up arrow, Control Alt up arrow to move back over to my screen. So, that's just a quick example of how much control you have without having to grab your mouse to do some of those things. But I do have kind of a mini complaint that turned out to be not a complaint, and that was that they decided for being able to change workspaces, they decided to do their official shortcuts are going to be super page up and super page down. The part that I don't like about that is that the page up and page down keys keep changing places depending on what brand of laptop you're in front of and what brand of desktop keyboard you're in front of. And I didn't like the idea that I was sometimes sitting down and hunting for the keys instead of just having them easily accessible. It turns out, though, that they left the legacy shortcuts, Control-Alt up and Control-Alt down, those are still in place. And if you went back to a version of GNOME that was 7 years ago, it would be the same shortcuts. So they're in my muscle memory, and it's just no problem. So I decided, instead of trying to modify the page up and page down shortcuts, I just decided to stick with Control-Alt up and Control-Alt down. Now, there is one shortcut that I do not like, and this is kind of maybe laptop related again, but Alt F4 has always been the close the window shortcut in the GNOME environment and a lot of other environments too. But I don't like Alt F4 because, again, this is a laptop thing, but the F4 key on some laptops is not the F4 key until you hold down the FN key also. So that 2-key shortcut becomes a 3-key clumsy shortcut, and I just don't like that as well. So I'm going to take a cue from Pop! OS. Pop! OS reassigned this key to Super W, and that is completely universal. You can do that in front of any keyboard and not have to hunt for it. So I decided to make that change. So we'll just take a quick look at the keyboard section of the settings app. And here's the listing of like 85 shortcuts here that you can change if you so desire. But here's the close window shortcut close to the bottom. So you just click on that and then you press the shortcut key combination that you want to use. So I press Super W and click on the set button. And now I will press Super W and close that window. Here's a couple of improvements that I'd like to mention in Gnome 3.32. They're both subtle but very much appreciated. So the first one is this. There's a long-standing set of automatic keyboard shortcuts in Ubuntu. Even if you went back several years, these shortcuts were in place. Let me describe them like this. If you took a look at the listing of programs in what used to be called the launcher, now called the dock, if you looked at this list and you took note of the position of each of the programs on the list, if you pressed the super key and the 1 key, that would start the program that was first in the list. Super 2 would start the second program. Super 3 would start the third program, and so on. That set of automatic keyboard shortcuts always existed in Ubuntu, but if you were in the stock version of GNOME, those keyboard shortcuts were not available. So I would find myself missing those shortcuts, so I would add in an extension called app keys, and then that would imitate that capability. But Gnome 3.32 has now slid in this particular capability under the radar, and so it doesn't make any difference if you're running Ubuntu or any other distribution of Linux that's running GNOME. If you're running Fedora or Manjaro or OpenSUSE, it doesn't make any difference. You can now access all of those programs with those automatic keyboard shortcuts that I just described. I think they should have done that a long time ago, but better late than never. There is also now a search capability that is fully functional in Gnome 3.32. Let me show you how that ends up showing up. I'm going to switch over to my activities overview, and I'm going to type in the word recipe. You see an immediate response here that locates all of my folders and files that contain the word recipe. That capability was not there in the previous 2 or 3 versions of Ubuntu and Pop! OS. I guess I have to assume that perhaps this program, the underlying program called Tracker, maybe had some memory leak problems or performance problems, and so they decided to not have it in place. Apparently, they've got all of those things resolved, and so Tracker is in place, so you can now do file searches very effectively right from your activities overview. I've mentioned Nextcloud a couple of times here, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Gardner Bryant, who goes by the name The Linux Gamer, and he's put out a YouTube video called Getting Set Up with Nextcloud the Easy Way. That was so good that I stopped using Dropbox, which I've used for a number of years, and I immediately implemented Nextcloud and haven't looked back. So thank you to Gardner Bryant. You might want to give that video a look if you're interested in that. Here's just a set of bonus keyboard shortcuts that I wanted to show you. I implement these 5 shortcuts using the dconf editor, and so I'll just give you a quick demo of that as I exit this. So thanks for watching, OSY Guy.